The Waste of Space Records, Native Son, by Dagger Blacker. Chapter 1. In Orbit did have a better ring to it than Homeless. The colonies had thought of everything when it came to branding. The Adelites circled us 3 times to blast the holographic billboard across the windshield. Orbiting insurance, for when the great outdoors isn't enough. Sliding scale, 180 to 250 drock per octaver. Sliding scale my ass. I waved my arm to swipe through, but this only set off the dreaded audio. Leave it to the colonies to rev up a hangover migraine I'd almost forgotten about. Animated figures sprang into looped existence beneath the letters, now read aloud by a narrator with the surpiest, most patronizing voice in the universe. Taking advantage of a limited time offer? Lucky dog. He congratulated an enthused human man rushing home in some ground vehicle. The animated man burst through the door of some Terran home to present their new shared policy to a woman with her hands clasped to her shocked face, eyebrows raised as her dog's ears were, seated to her side, both marveling at the incredible deal. My blood crystallized, every hair on my body bristling, but none so much as the thick black blades coating my 4-foot tail. I clicked the power button so the raggy treadmill below me ground to a halt. Without the whir of the belt, the cockpit was drowned in quiet. Not silence, that would be too generous a word for all the discordant beeps and clicks accompanying the few automated controls, but the comfortable quiet of a space that is usually occupied. Even though it felt ridiculous, I chanced to glance back toward the entrance. The rectangular doorway was empty and shadow-bound. Of course it was. What was I expecting? To find Ares Adams himself lurking behind me like some hokey horror flick villain? Then again, casual terrorism did fall within the purview of the Secretary of Space. These targeted ads are getting too good. I shook my head, but my hand still trembled when I reached for my cabin temperature bottle of Kylix Kolsch, downing the rest of the honey mint beer. It was the last of a batch we produced seasons ago. Honey so restricted now, we've been settling for drops of wax in our tea. In other words, the sweetest thing I'd taste for years. At last, I dismissed the ad. Rather, attempted to dismiss the ad. The projection jammed halfway across the windshield, the audio chiming in again to remind me what a lucky dog I would be to scoop up such a deal. This wasn't any reason to write up a conspiracy, just a quirk in the Kylix's sensor system. With one final, exaggerated swipe of my palm, the holographic ad flitted out of sight. I sighed, flipped the inactive switch at the treadmill controls. The belt submerging into the floor tiles, metal plating sliding out to replace it at the helm of the ship. That was enough for now. The fuel cell indicator was already blinking red. The rhythmic metal tap of Cadbury's scuffed blue boots announced his arrival before he appeared in the mouth of the corridor, feeding into the cluttered cabin. Soft yellow light flooding out around him as he cleared the crust from his eyes. Aye, you should make a move on the steering wheel if you're gonna stare at it all night. The first mate clutched a pot of iced black coffee, our favorite. He yawned, tilted the pot over his mouth, and spilling a little on his broad, wrinkle-ridden tie-dye spacesuit. A fat brown droplet clinging to the gross, sparse hairs over his lip he'd taken great pleasure lately in introducing as his first mustache. As always after waking, his Billwin brogue was more pronounced than usual. In the mornings, he was more Keplerite than Orbiter. The same way when I sat in the pilot's seat, I was more Xeno than Captain. Not that many wouldn't see his hometown in his frost-encased, hip-length black dreadlocks, grown from a fresh cut a Kaplarashtian holy man had administered after Cad's pledge of peace. That's rich coming from you, Mr. Vicalitism. Cad choked on the coffee caught in his throat, swallowed hard and glared at me. That's not funny. He lowered his voice. And not so loud. Pool will hear you. This reaction from him had become so regular, I was beginning to think it was stress rather than his testosterone injections that were driving his hairline back. Despite how overdue this admission would be, I cared for Cad too much to spoil it for him, so I dropped the subject. That, and I was pretty sure if I pressed on, heat combustive embarrassment. The ship was a rehabilitated FR-8 extra room vehicle, or freighter, the sun-kissed model, standard for hauling jobs on planets neighboring their star. We could survive an explosion on the outside, but inside, well, at least the Kylix would get a fresh coat of paint. Better defuse the bomb. For your information, I've been doing a lot more than tending the wheel. I got some miles in, cleared out inbox, went over the adverse pressure logs, blah blah blah, captain stuff. Cad waved the same way I did to swipe past the ads. Some of us like captain stuff. I didn't hide the bite in my tone. And, might I remind you, you're the first mate, Cad. If anything ever happened to me, you're designated co-pilot. He gave that easy signature shrug. That would only matter if anything happened to you. Despite the colony codes on Xeno ascension to the position, I felt we were best suited to it. Just considering the practical angle, a cosmocraft wasn't like a human. Like a Xeno, it was always on, gliding along the edge of functional and destructive. Because of this, the exercise was threefold for me. Xenos had more energy than we knew what to do with. Born with genetic predisposition for high ion octane maneuvers through enemy territory. The running sessions also wore out the ionic fuel reserves, if I kept a consistent speed of 12 cometons per aven. The third function was more practical. There was no choice but to exercise. Space didn't allow one to so much as laze around. In order to keep up with the constant pressure of the space-time continuum lounging across our shoulders, grievers were required to exercise at least 4 aurons awash. Per tradition, it was the captain's duty to enforce this schedule, but one would soon realize their mistake in skipping weight wash when their arm bones snapped at the whisper of a wind upon landing. Cadbury glared down at the dashboard. "We've got a radio in here somewhere," he mused, brushing aside hollow cans of Kylix Colch Classic. I didn't realize how many until they thudded into the bin bolted to the dash. Must have been a real productive drain. Clang, clang. A flurry of those tiny black fruit flies we picked up on a drop in the Condor quadrant tore out of the cans in a blurry buzz, before settling onto the dashboard to let the beer in their bellies settle. Clang, clang. More flies and more passive aggression. I just pray you sober up before you get on the treadmill. Cad drew out the moment before dropping the last can with a clang that made me want to smack the Kepler brogue clean out of his mouth. Sure, Cad was the only sober member of the crew, and I didn't have any problem with that, but what I chose to do and when I chose to do it was my business. My apologies, master. I didn't repress the snarl behind each syllable. I didn't realize Dr. Hare had signed over ownership to you, of all people. Don't call me that, Gene. Cad said it firmly, but with no modicum of anger. He fiddled with the radio embedded in the control panel, turning all 3 dials until the roaring static gave way to sputtery chatter. A debate, and an intense one. One that a host was failing to rein in. The host. "Now you must remember your children back in Trisp may be listening, Senator. Senator from Trisp. Then I know even they can comprehend the madness of allowing the bottling moratorium to drag on this long. 3 days? The companies whose taxes we depend on can't function under this anarchy." A new voice. "Colony Cola doesn't pay taxes to Trisp anyway. Not to anyone. Nor do you, Senator." The host. "Let's remember to keep the discussion civil and not gossip. That may fly back on Toysev, but with the People's Pipe Brigade, People's Pipe Representative, nothing flies back on Toysev. We ran out of fuel months ago, but there's nothing to commodify there, so we're left to fend for ourselves." Senator of Trisp. "All you Generation Adams kids have it easy. When I was a kid and we wanted fuel, we mined for it ourselves." People's Pipe Representative. "Then we should be allowed ownership over our own water to pump it ourselves. And over our own homes, the land we've lived on for decades now." The host cut the mic. People's Pipe Representative. "Long live Grievous! Long live..." The static washed over the words once more before faint music fought through. I thanked the great griever Cad wasn't a news guy. The last thing any of us needed was to get tangled up in that Occupy Pluto nonsense. Grievers holding hands and singing around the ice pipe a quarter of inner space depended on. all while the gold suits pressed in. Only colony officials and kaleidosons had access to laser tech, the former having stolen the blueprints from the latter. And even if the colony guns were less accurate, powerful, and precise, they were no less deadly, raining down from pill ships stationed near every satellite, so we couldn't so much as access the internet. That left one with only socialization to occupy the time. For this reason, a Starnaut's success depended entirely on a well-adjusted crew. Good thing, then, that I wasn't an official Starnaut. The warble of dead air receded as Libby Kissel's reggae rock vocals blared out of the radio. Time for a switch, eating up every iota of silence in the ship, in my brain, that the steel plating of the ship's insides vibrated as if to burst. Cadbury shouted along, banging his head. First they eject us to space, then they expect us to rent. Bounce, 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 bounce. I got pick out, bounce, bounce, bounce. I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of it. Bounce, back out, bounce, 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 bounce. Cause first they run the land dry, and then they hike up the price. Bounce, 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 bounce. In case you're wondering why, in case you're wondering why. If we're hungry, we can't rise up. If we're starving, we can't do shit. And I've had about enough of the lies. I think it's time for a switch. I think it's time for a switch. As if a pair of Cat's fine wood-handled screwdrivers had been driven directly into my brain, I cried out, though it was hardly even audible over the refrain of the chorus. When the initial shock of pain had subsided, I groaned, every wash with this, though I skipped the bit where I reminded him that I had the literal hearing and wretched long fuzzy ears of a bat, wrenching the middle dial counterclockwise to dull the deeper bass and synth tones. Oh, right. Sorry, mate. His sincerity kept me from harping on the matter, but only Cad could so easily forget something he'd been reminded of every wash for the last 4 yushes. He nodded at the green phone nestled in its cradle along the chrome control panel. Any new orders? Just a small drop, a 6-pack of the lavender stuff. Some farmer wants to know Ush's secret. Pool's secret, Cad corrected. The lavender batch was Pool's idea, Captain. Ush wanted to experiment with a chocolate porter, but we lost our confection connection on Tea Garden, remember? Right, I winked. Wouldn't want to miscredit a crew member. Aye, aye, he blushed. Anyway, I went on, they sent directions, code too, for some powerful shades. The out in the Henrietta halo. Cad winced as if the glare of the diamond disc was fresh. No worries, Captain, he said. I'll just put my eyes away in their carrying case. Yeah, well, there's no need to rush, I said. Printer's busted. He took his tool belt off of the back of his chair, Cad's trusty purple steel hammer hanging in its holster. When does it need to be up and running by? I put on a phony constable voice, the one we all knew too well, robotic, detached, yet commanding. At ease, First Mate Cadbury. It's not due right now. Cad donned the belt anyway, as much a part of him by now as my tail or horns or sabers. Does it pay? In food, I said in my normal voice, giddy shivers gliding across my shoulders. Cad rubbed the back of his neck as he slumped into his seat at my right hand. Dude, I just got chills. Next to water, food was the most valuable currency of all. Well, human food. Of course, working with the land-ridden was a double-barreled hotshot. The benefits included eating Nutri-Soup instead of stale oat flakes. The downsides included the constant reminder that we couldn't touch down for more than an Auron before the Dragoons came knocking with warrants in hand. Not a lot of Xenogene captains, it turns out, nor Kaleidosons traveling with humans, nor, despite our never-ending collective run-ins with X's, queers. Recognizability sort of came with the territory, though, when it came to the Kylix. Flamboyant didn't begin to describe the ship. The rusted, shuddering shelling of flimsy metal paneling slowing off of the groaning iron frame of the condemned freighter. What remained patchworked into delicate durability with welded, misshapen, discarded scraps and gleaming copper sheets we'd made off with from some construction yards. The outside, a kind of plaid of welded seams and red rust, silver and faux gold metal, tagged in red graffiti with every astrogram handle imaginable. Suck my cockpit. Comet vomit ban. Ugly orbiters only. The largest and most evident defacement was of the sun-kissed model logo, letters raised in rusted gold, but the SUN had been pried off, replaced with a bright red ass. Any captain would struggle to proudly strut onto the ass-kissed, but the unsightly error was glazed and rubbing resistant. Ass was here to stay. He expanded a cabinet under the proximity radar, pulled out a tin box of dehydrated oat flakes, and turned it upside down over his mouth, spraying bits of grain as he gurgled another stanza, using the box as a stand-in microphone to utilize the acoustic inside. In case you're wondering why, in case you're wondering why. He extended the box to me, a peace offering. Is it urgent? The order? Well, yes and no. I took the box, just enough left for a bowl, the sole remaining community bowl, the rest having wandered mysteriously to the crew's sleep modules, was located on a shelf under the steering wheel. This was what life in Ever Orbit had reduced the captain to, keeper of the bowl. It was next to a tall black candle with a long white charred wick. On the front of the glass casing, a raised, painted image of a black-horned skeleton holding a set of scales in one hand and a blazing orange star in the other, grinned out at me. The candle was glued into place alongside the bottom, just as the dingy bronze tray it melted on was, as was the smattering of pink, crusty bones scattered around it. Bird bones, expensive in open space, and worth every droken. One long one the seller had told me was from a wing. To think, creatures on Earth had wings like ships did, flew across the skies like satellites. I wondered, not for the first time, if they also made beeping noises every few seconds. I felt around for the green transparent lighter in one corner of the shelf, the only thing not glued down. Lit the wick just to blow out the flame, let the heady tendril of gray smoke struggle up toward the steel-plated ceiling. Thanks for the eats, I said before shutting the shelf on the face of the great griever. Cad grimaced as he passed the pot. We'd probably get more orders if you didn't worship a pile of bones. We get more orders if we weren't rum runners. I tipped the aged, pungent coffee above the bowl of oats, a steaming fresh black stream washing past the dried froth crusted around the rim as it sloshed over my oat flakes. We can't be so obvious. There's been a lot of dragoon activity in the Perseus arm. Envoys chasing out the stragglers, I guess. Cracking down on contraband, and not just beer, but books, comics, posters. We'll have to give the order a few scepters. Cad said, so basically, no orders for scepters, no orders, no drokens, no drokens, no kylix, no us. He coughed into the crook of his arm. Even the freshest dye job couldn't hide the purplish flakes that sprayed across his sleeve. For now, though, I averted my gaze as Cad dug around in his pockets. Where in Yuzza is my inhaler? Only one colony-bound company produced the cyano-sickness treatment. Something about patents. And just one cost more than what the entire ship was worth. Losing one would be a major hit to the Octave Leaf finances. Luckily, Cad was so dependable in habit and demeanor. I just had to feel around under the intercom to close my fingers around the little canister. Handed it to him. Hey, if the beer and soda demand dries up, there's always the streaker circuit, I said. We both chuckled at that. No way we were cut out for drug transport. We were hardly cut out for rum running. Intoxicants were a reliable source of income, if sometimes meager. Caffeine and alcohol a competitive market since the Universal Temperance Order went into effect 4 decades ago. But Streaker, the glittery emerald green powder, was serious business. A market people didn't appreciate competition in. Cad read my mind when he said, "You're a fine pilot, Captain, but on this topic, it's best to stay in our lane." "Hear, hear," I seconded, pulling away. Now, before the coffee turned the cereal to mush. The first spoonful, grains, a hint of honey, and a heaping helping of caffeine, down the gullet and dropping into my empty stomach like a stone, as good to my system as a volt of electricity, chasing away the chill, just for now. I scooped 5 more mouthfuls down quick, didn't want to tip the bowl so far I lost sight of the fuel dial. Tried to keep my feet kicked up over it so Cad wouldn't notice how abnormally low we were. I hadn't just been gazing out all night, I'd been monitoring the ion loss. Just enough to sputter to a mercy refill from our favorite constable, and the only one in the entire solar system who wouldn't slap telekinetic cuffs over our wrists the moment we were within range. I was pushing it, had already played this game earlier in the Octover, and we never met twice within the same one. Constable Antiope, slipping us extra ions and me, each time a little extra affection. In the yush since our flirting had escalated, we hadn't worked up yet to easing that golden uniform off. Everything between us gradual, careful, planned. Sometimes even messaged about beforehand. With just 10 or so avens to catch up before the crew grew suspicious of my absence, there was no time to be shy about how much we wanted each other, but no time to finish whatever we started either. The only upside was the anticipation. "Hello? Jean? Jean? How are we on fuel?" Cadbury tidied the control panel, balling papers and discarded coordinate notes, tossing them into the mincinerator. The less excess load on the ship, the better. There was no room for junk. But Cad had picked a hell of a time to start caring about cleanliness. "Good," I answered. Cad couldn't know, couldn't get suspicious. We were near enough now, though, to the intergalactic space station. The rotating metal pyramid different from the intergalactic space station only in physical shape, name, and legality. Each drew in business, contraband, and important people, though the undergal was home to the most important by far. Ush swept into the room in a whoosh of wrinkled black fabric, her lucky lab coat nearly the same shade and length as her raven hair. Her spacesuit under the coat was the brightest thing about her. Pale lavender, the same as mine, per standard issue for grievers, given the cheap cost of cloth with softer colors. If purple signaled weakness to the colonies, then grievers wore our weakness on our sleeves. The doctor took her own position at the left-hand circuit breaker recessed into the dashboard, fiddled with the audio override to switch the radio to a channel dedicated to rap. She uncapped the metal canister she kept in her coat pocket, steam and the scent of spiced tea pouring out as a sped-up beat replaced Kissel's languid melodies. Ush nodded along to a fast-paced, almost aggressive verse. Her fingers closed around the steel cap, were as densely tattooed as her hands, as her arms and shoulders. Ush's sleeve of ink, which had at some point been legible, a list of something. The doctor didn't care to elaborate. Now cross-hatched over in black lines that leaked down her skin to form the negative image of a crescent moon on the back of her left hand. On the other arm, by the time the ink reached her right hand, the chatter had ebbed away to the image of a star. I'd always figured it was the name of some fallen friend, or maybe her parents, given the imagery. A way to say, "You are always with me," and, "To me, you will always live on." Oh, the view is incredible! Ha ha, I spared a flat laugh. Kind of our little tradition, as there was nearly never anything to see. A black, airless expanse, frozen over and only warm where it burnt too brightly for us to go. Never gets old. Neither will we if we don't refuel. Poole rubbed the crust from their 6 orange eyes as they lumbered into the cabin. At 8 feet tall, Poole had to duck to enter every room in the ship, including the cockpit now. They yawned, the only Kaleidosin I knew to do so, flexing their 6 external gills, arranged in sets of 3 on either side of the translation officer's head. Each gill composed of a scaled golden stalk, covering one side, with a sea of writhing pink filaments on the other. They had opted for the patch adult suit instead of the bare one, splattered in words, all in different colored inks and handwriting. What these said, I had no idea. They were in Ruriger, a language spoken only by Kaleidozans, and even then, only in the reaches of space where Bias didn't go. The language so throaty and extragalactic, most humans considered it growling instead of speech. To my ears, though, the language resembled music more. It hadn't been ascribed letters until the last decades. Kaleidozans had no need for writing. They could communicate mind to mind. So written Ruriger had been created to allow humans to learn it. Not that many took up this offer. Because of this, the Kaliid creation myths had been immortalized in song. One that was scepters long, that Poole only knew snatches of, singing snippets to the crew on our calmer deliveries. Some lyrics were stitched into their sleeves, but I couldn't tell which ones. I did recognize a few of the patches accompanying the language. Typical astropunk fare. Flaming dragoon ships, a boot stomping a tattered gold suit. The largest patch, in the center of Poole's back, was the encircled image of a locust rat lapping from a river of blood. As the sayings went, just a single pair hitching a ride on a crumb-ridden ship could result in an entire colony sweeping over a luscious harvest of crops, turning a thriving, if artificial, ecosystem into a worn desert. For this reason, most pest repellent products boasted that the toxic formula inside was locust rat effective. For this reason, too, anyone from outside the Milky Way was very familiar with the term. Poole cleared the dried green sap from their stubby purple thorns along their 2 finger-thick, arm-length whiskers, the mustache situated beneath the 3 thin openings at the end of their snout that Kaleidozans used as a nose. No, not a mustache. Poole had corrected me enough times. Calids didn't grow facial hair. Rhizomes. They waited until they thought no one was looking to smear the sap across the front of their suit, the same way everyone knew they disposed of their stray scales. Then looked at Cad as they stroked the long purple raised welt running vertically down the underside of their jaw and throat. The welt had began as a line, like some kind of tattoo, but in the last scepters had grown swollen and deep violet, seeming at some angles to throb gently. With their scaled hand, they used the audio override to change the rap station to a radio station pulsing with drums, electric guitar, and ample, almost too much, mic feedback. Their favorite punk channel. Poole had already donned the polished metal gauntlet opposite their left arm. Hand of delicate silver framework, an arm of sturdy iron rotting. The only piece of Cad's handiwork devoid of rust. The translation officer stretched as they sat between us and me, loosing a few bright bronze iridescent scales in the process. The reflective flakes floating to the floor like shavings from a glorious polished statue. Ush, did you leave that damn blender plugged in again? Cad chimed in, addressing the doctor. I told you last time, the liquefier 2200 is frying our battery. Not to mention, Poole huffed, I'm getting tired of that grouching, rattling noise in the tank. We're running low so often lately I can hardly get any sleep. Kaleidozans don't sleep anyway. Ush didn't address anyone but the facts. She held her tea in one hand as she strode to the visijector. She had a bookmarked icon that made the pale green hollow screen morph into a race, the Equinit Derby. Besides, I've been using the blender cup as a mold observation study for months. The tank rattles whether we're low on fuel or not. Sweat rolled down my face, into my mouth, soured on my tiger's tongue. The taste of my own bullshit. It must be a rock stuck in the recessed hinges, but I'm afraid to reach inside. It's so hot my skin would peel clean off. Poole, Cad, and I watched as one of the robust, four-legged, panting beasts lapped the others, sweeping past with a trot, a bark, then a triumphant whinny, as the announcer called it, the voice tinny over the intercom. Stellar Fellow steals another mid-season race. After that loss back on Gleece, everyone wondered if another streak would emerge. I'm beginning to think, yes! Ush echoed the announcer, snapping the race off as the winning equinate accepted a decorative flower shawl. Flowers, a symbol of great honor in the colonies. Pool Tisk shook their head. That's a nasty sport, Ush. Oh, they like to run. Ush waved a hand, taking their seat again. They're bred to. It's just interesting to see how Terex uses its precious limited land, the translations officer said. As for the tank, since I don't want you mammals to lose your precious skin, I'll take a look inside. Finally grease the drum and remove the accursed pebble. What would you humans do without me? Get captured by kaleidosons, I supplied. Partly because it was true, but partly to steer conversation away from the depleting fuel. The translations officer had talked our way out of being turned in for the collective 9 million drak reward countless times the last 5 yushes. Pool drummed their 9 long, elegant fingers along the dashboard, in time with that faint whirring rattle. There it goes now. Bang, bang, bang. That's definitely the word of the wash, Ush grumbled up from her cup of tea. Pool's 3 nostrils flared. How many aurons a drain do you spend in that lab, Ush? You reek of booze and sweat. Usher shrugged, tea steam streaming around her mouth even as she drank. Someone's got to cook up ideas for the new barley season, she said. And this I must emphasize as a certified professional. Doctors don't sweat. A metal scritching noise announced the arrival of Tendon before he appeared, clicking his beak, black bristles shivering in anticipation along that arm-length body as the crocat scampered into the cockpit. Long, his hind paws and forepaws so far apart that his body between them seemed to undulate like smoke. The only thing stubby about him was his tail, the end still pale white, dozens of tendrils writhing at the end like living, bending bone, the result of the doctor's latest experiment. Removing the long, feathery end every few sectors to study the regeneration process and study the detached side. Ush dropped a steel biscuit. The little crocat devoured it in 2 tiny, bone-crushing bites. Tendon mewled, nudging at Ush's pocket. More! He squawked. I more! Me more! He'd been vocalizing a lot more lately. Ush's careful training regimented in order to develop a complete patient's dialogue. I'm not a doctor if I don't get feedback on pain, Ush had said once. That would make me a pervert. It was said crocats had more than parroting skills, had intelligence exceeding that of an earth dog or dolphin, yet the little parasite had never managed to utter anything that wasn't food-related. No more, Ush said firmly. She reached into her lab coat, pulled out a small green ball. Play? Tendon lingered a moment, cocking his head at the doctor as if considering this, before slinking off to hide in the recesses of the ship till its next meal was due. Ush shook her head, pocketing the ball with a chuckle. I'd love to be surprised one of these washes. She didn't look at Tendon as she said it, though. She looked to me. Ush tapped the blinking fuel indicator, spinning in her seat to face me head on. Let me guess. We've got no choice but to dock on the Undergal. It's that or the Indigal, I said. Another running joke amongst the crew. We were expressly banned from the intergalactic space station, so attempting to dock and refuel there would result in an immediate arrest. Even the Undergal wasn't without its security detail. In a sweeping deal with the United Colonies of Terex, every unhuman establishment in the galaxy, or what was left of them once the Star Knot swept through, required an Earthborn representative, Exodus envoys, to ensure that humanity was treated fairly by their many gifted neighbors, and keep careful watch for criminal activity. What criminal meant exactly was, of course, up to humans to decide. Our steady rum-running gig had gone unnoticed until the hydro tower incident 2 yushes ago. Siphoning water through a series of metal straws taped end to end works better as a drawing on a napkin than a heist. The resulting chase, careening through 2 entire quadrants of inner space until we lost the 5 dragoons tailing us, had cost us the ultra-aluminum plating Cadbury had installed fresh off our latest purchase to date. No one died, though, and more importantly, no one got arrested. This, we decided then, was worth toasting to. Of course, this act of defiance had injected life into the 5-Yush crusade for my capture. My crimes laid out plainly on the holographic billboards flashing across the galaxy, along with an old picture of me, before my horns had grown in and my hair had grown out. 1 count of desertion of a colony-appointed position, 2 counts of theft of colony property, 1 for the Kylix, the other for my DNA. The past 2 Yushes, we gained the upper hand in the fuel department, relying less on lazy patrol dragoons to land frequently, conserving ions, and more on the envoy posted on the Undergalactic, Constable Antiope Adams, Ares' middle daughter, and my latest girlfriend. I knew the crew would balk at my repeated meetups with her and outright deny her request for contact that I redirected from the crew in-message log to my own. 5 in a row. Urgent. It'll be a quick stop. In and out. And back in, Ush said. And back out. Sable, seriously, we live within 13 square comatons of each other. We all know about your little under-the-table, under-gal smooch fest. Poole nudged her, snickering. What do you mean, Ush? Everyone comes back from the bathroom breathless with their suit on backwards. Kat gave the slightest frown at Ush and Poole's physical contact. Okay, so it wasn't exactly a secret I was getting more than the tank serviced on the Undergal. But Kat's longtime crush on our resident translator was also a well-known fact. The infatuation so constant, it was like a fixture of the Cosmocraft. The black metal steering wheel, the silver-framed window that was supposed to be a circle but was more of an oval due to ill-cut glass, and Nelson Cadbury's silent, throbbing love for Poole. Though Dr. Usher Ugomir's affections were reserved exclusively for intense surgical sessions, Poole Vicalidizen was indeed her closest friend aboard the Kylix. They'd known each other longer, traveling for 2 Yushes aboard a corporate drill ship before catching Kat and I attempting to steal their fuel with the extension arm of a vacuum. Since then, Ush had taken to checking in for the daily captain's catch-up before slinking off into her laboratory, which doubled as the infirmary, and Poole had done everything in their power to avoid one-on-one conversations with the first mate. Locust Ref for life, you just hate me cause I fucked your wife. Locust Ref for life, you just hate me cause I fuck all night. 2, 3, 4! I clapped my hands over my ears. Great griever, Poole, turn it down. I reached for the audio dial before they could, twisting it to half level. While I was at it, though, I decided I'd had enough of entertaining everyone else's choice of genre. It took some careful manipulation to find station 3000.6, but when I did, I could hardly believe what I was hearing. This station was dedicated to electronic music, but the DJs dabbled in disco, funk, and my personal favorite, hyperpop. Like electronic pop, but hopped up on streaker. The audio version of a shock to the chest to revive a dying person, which felt like an appropriate comparison, because this particular track, by this particular artist, was the same that had been playing when I'd met her. Now there was something the whole crew could agree on. Music taste and tidiness disagreements be damned. Yes, the only romance-centric opinion that Cad, Ush, and Poole shared was that Antiope was a shitty choice of girlfriend. Not that I blamed them. Our first Yush together had been smeared in that grimy judgment the Earthborn specialized in producing, like a snail does slime. Judgment on Ant's part, and over everything. The state of the ship, our bare-bones medicine supply, our spiritual beliefs, my openness regarding my occasional intimacy with unhumans, but apprehension too, and this from both of us. Xenos and humans didn't mingle platonically, not to mention romantically. Crossing that line, committing xenomy, was an act analogous to high treason in colony courts. So neither made a move, none of us knowing how to extinguish the persistent flame between us, but also not how to feed it. The tentative friendship we shared didn't develop. Not then, but tapered off as each of us went back to what we did best. Her ticketing off-route orbiters, like me, out in inner space to fulfill the quotas set by her boss, the colonies. Me evading constables like her as we slung 6-packs of Kylix Kolch to citizens on the fringes of inner space. After, though, there were my drains in the pilot seat, refreshing my inbox. What it was exactly, it had taken me scepters to work out. Sure, she was a filthy loyalist, and Ares' daughter, but her upbringing had gotten to her in as many ways as it hadn't. Aunt was a woman in the middle, unwilling to make an arrest, but just as unwilling to quit her job. Me or the colonies, her home or the unknown. This was something I'd weighed yushes ago before abandoning my own post. More than anyone probably, I understood the draw of stability, the comfort of following orders. The steady, deep electronic drumline intertwined with the whine of a synthesizer, the music drilling through my ears, down my chest, and into a part of me that only throbbed when Aunt was on my mind, or in my arms. It had taken her 3 octavers to make a decision, just long enough for the crew's hatred to bake into every mention of her on board. Despite the rough start, I never had managed to stop waiting for that call, was there to answer, and more. Oh my Eldeniv, do all 6 of my eyes deceive me? Poole thrust their gleaming steel finger out at my hand, resting on the side stick embedded in the control panel, the red button on the far side depressed beneath my thumb. Autopilot. They're daydreaming. I released the button, physically shaking my head to clear it. Okay, I admitted. You caught me, sorry. It's not like we're flying through a minefield. The colonies had set up a smattering of floating death zones at the edge of the galaxy. Kaleidoscope traps. I'll have to track down my stethoscope, said Ush, patting her pockets in a show of mock panic. Only a heart read can confirm, but Captain, I'm afraid you've got it bad. Cad gave a snort of a laugh. Struck down by love sickness, he bemoaned. I was wondering what that was. The first mate nodded at my boots. I looked down. While our suits were liquid, tear, and fireproof, our boots could stain as easily as the Kylix. A big splash of caramel-colored vomit screamed out amidst the black rubber. Ha ha ha. I tried to remember if I'd thrown up in the shoot room as well. This was a worry for later. Much later. Enough about me, Poole. It's been a while since we touched down. Cat's been telling me how much he misses the way you look on a dance floor. Kaleidosons were so graceful in movement, they turned it into a sort of secondary language. Showing off on the dance floor was practically the planetary pastime. Cat swiveled in his chair to protest, but Poole had perked up. More than perked up, actually. Grinning as the violet welt on their throat erupted into an ultraviolet fan, tinged with gold and glittering like a starfield. The translations officer stuffed the apparatus back into their throat, and not gently, keeping their silver hand clutched to it. That's never happened to me before. Nelson's brow furrowed. Are you running a fever or something? Maybe Ush can have a look at you. Poole shook their head. I feel fine, they said. I think I could just use a leg stretch. They swiveled in their own seat to address me. Sable, would you be joining us before or after the bi-actively makeout sesh? Before. I gripped the steering wheel. Now this was what I was made for. Shoving the reclining bar with my legs till I was supine in my chair, the central dashboard above me, the left panel splayed out in front of Poole and Ush, the right panel sprawling before Cadbury in an empty chair. Hundreds of controls in the form of toggle levers, rotary switches, thumb wheels, monitors, lights, and push buttons looming the way I like them to. The universe before me, so all I had to do to weave sense from chaos was reach out. I did, wrenching the thruster's dial to subsonic. A pilot knew when to go full throttle, but a captain knew when to rein it in. Gently, I pulled the steering wheel downward. The Kylix's nose plunged through a tunnel of turbulence, giving the entire Cosmocraft a jolt before evening out. I won't have any energy after.